This lesson is over slope, linear equations, and then we're getting to parallel and perpendicular lines at the end. So this first one is a blank slide because I wanted to add this really quick. In my opinion, the hardest part of today is taking a problem that is in this form and getting it into slope-intercept form. Now, we will talk about slope-intercept form a little bit later, but essentially we're getting this y all by itself. So to get that y all by itself, the first thing we need to do is get rid of the 3x. Now, the big thing with 3 and x, we're not dividing by 3. I know a lot of times if you have 3x, you divide by 3 to get rid of the 3. But we're dealing with the whole 3x. We want the y by itself, so I don't need to split up the x and the 3. So I'm going to subtract the whole thing, 3x. I'm going to move the whole 3x to the other side. And we have 2y is equal to negative 3x plus 6. And the last step, now we're dividing by 2. And the reason we're dividing by 2 is, again, I want this y all by itself. I didn't want the x by itself. I want the y by itself. So I divide by 2. Now, some people divide the whole thing by 2, but for our purposes, it's going to be way better to divide each one of these terms by 2. So we get y is equal to negative 3 over 2x plus 3. One more really quick example. If we have 5x plus 8y, let's do minus 8y just because, is equal to 32. So one of the ways, the analogy I use for this, and I know it's a little bit cheesy, but this 5x, since they're right next to each other, I always say that they're best friends. We don't want to split up these best friends unless we have to. So I'm going to keep the best friends together. I'm going to subtract 5x. So those best friends still get to stay best friends. I always like to put the x first. Whoops, sorry. I always like to put the x first because that's usually how it's written in slope-intercept form. You don't necessarily have to, but it's going to help you in the long run. So I would get in the habit of that. So the reason we did not have to split up the 5x was that we could keep those best friends together because we weren't solving for x. Y, the 8 and the y, they're best friends, but we have to split them up. And we tried, we waited till the very end, but we have to split them up to get that y by itself. So we let you guys be friends for the whole time so far. Now we've got to split you guys up because we have to get the y by itself. So y is equal to negative over negative is a positive, 5 over x minus 4. Last thing, if you have negative 5x over negative 8, that's the same thing as negative 5 over negative 8x. This is what we see a lot of times. So just in case you see that difference. And then again, obviously I took negative over negative as a positive. But I wanted to make sure you saw that with the x, make sure you saw that extra step. So students will be able to find the slope of lines. Graph lines determine parallel and perpendicular lines. The graph lines we'll do a little bit later after this lesson. But first we're going to talk about slope. Now we have positive slopes and negative slopes. All you have to do to identify these is as you go from left to right, just like you read, if it is going up, it's positive. If it's going down, it's negative. That's a really handy thing to see because a lot of people that mix these up, that miss problems, a lot of times they'll put a negative slope instead of positive. And if you can tell by the graph what's negative and what's positive, you can catch that mistake a lot of times. Now, the other two we look at is zero slope and undefined slope. First off, a zero slope is always when you end up with a fraction that is 0 over some number. If you have 0 in the numerator, it's always going to be a zero slope. Undefined slope is always going to have the 0 in the denominator. You can never have 0 in the denominator, so that's why it's undefined. I know which one is which. The way I memorize it is because horizontal has these two zeros in it, so a horizontal line is always a zero slope. I student taught at a middle school for a little while, and one of the teachers there said that undefined, you can remember because if you were to stand on this line, you'd fall and you'd be undefined. So I don't know if that helps. Last but not least, the equation. If you ever have a zero slope line, the equation is going to be y is equal to some number. An undefined slope line is going to be x is equal to some number. So a horizontal line is going to be y is equal to 8 or 10 or negative 3. There's no x's, just the y. A vertical line will be x is equal to just a number, no y's, nothing. So x is 4, x is equal to 10, x is equal to 19, all those. So talking about slope, the vertical change over the horizontal change, the rise over run, we'll talk about that a little bit later. The one we're going to use for this section right here is this formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then they specify where the denominator can't be 0. They put that to be specific. I wouldn't worry about that because if the denominator is 0, it is a vertical line. So first off, remember, every ordered pair, we have an x and a y. So some people struggle with this, and it's literally just knowing what numbers to plug in. So we always have an x and y. So this ordered pair, we have x and y. This ordered pair, we have an x and y. Well, if I just say x, which one am I talking about, the 11 or the negative 9? So that's why they go through and they specify this is x of 0.1, this is y of 0.1, this is the x of 0.2, this is the y of 0.2. Now, it doesn't actually matter which one you pick as 0.1 or 0.2, doesn't make any difference. I always make the first one 0.1 because then I don't have to think about it. I just always do it the same. Now, it's not a bad idea to label these until you get pretty good at this. But from here, the formula, y2 minus y1, so 17 minus y1 is 19, over x2 minus x1. Now, my other word of wisdom from here is just use a calculator. I know some of you guys are really good with negatives, but it gets really confusing when we have so many negatives and so many minus signs. So if I were you, just 17 minus 19 in your calculator, that will not lie to you. That's negative 2. Negative 9 minus 11 is negative 20. And then reduce this fraction. Negative 2 over negative 20 is positive 1 over positive 10. So again, if I were you, I would definitely label these x1, y1, x2, y2. So I have 7 minus negative 5 over 2 minus 2. Again, 7 minus negative 5. A lot of you guys know that minus negative is plus, so 7 plus 5 is 12. You're absolutely correct, but just use a calculator because then you don't have to worry about those positives and negatives and minus and negative and any of that stuff. It's definitely going to help if you at least double check that. 2 minus 2 is 0. Well, remember, if you have 0 in the denominator, that means you're dividing by 0. You can't do that. That means this is undefined. Now, if you have problems remembering which one is which, is this undefined or is this a 0 slope, put it in your calculator. The one thing I always ask of students is if you just remember that you have a 0 in your fraction means you have to put it in your calculator, you'll help yourself. Because 12 divided by 0 in your calculator will give you an error message. It'll say divide by 0 or error, undefined, or error, something like that. If you put the other way in, if it was 0 divided by 12, your calculator would just say 0. So that's how you can tell the difference. An error will give you undefined. 0 is just 0. So this next one, x1, y1, x2, y2. And again, I would write it out and I would be careful. I have some people that put x1, x2. That doesn't make any sense. You have to have an x and a y for every ordered pair. So 6 minus 6 over 3 minus negative 1. That's 0 over 4. Now 0 is in the numerator, so this slope is 0. And I'm going to keep going, x1, y1, x2, y2. I'm going fairly quickly through this, so I probably will make a mistake somewhere. I apologize ahead of time about that. Negative 15 minus 20 over negative 1 minus negative 6. Negative 15 minus 20. Again, a lot of people put negative 5 for this one. Negative 15 minus 20 is negative 35. I maybe even said it wrong the first time. Then negative 1 minus negative 6. Again, a lot of people know that when you minus negative, you need a plus, so a lot of people put 7 for this. No, it would be negative 1 plus 6, but again, just put it in your calculator. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I even still do that a lot of times just to check my work. So negative 35 over 5, reduce that down, you get negative 7 over 1, which is just negative 7. Three minus 3 over negative 2 minus negative 6. 3 minus 3 is 0. Doesn't actually even matter what the denominator is at this point, but you should end up getting positive 2. No. See, I already made a mistake with that. Positive 4. So 0 over positive 4, the slope is just 0. So I'd go ahead and do these on your own. These last couple, so I would pause, do this on your own, then hit play to check your work. 9 minus 10 over negative 18 minus negative 6. Again, even if you're really good at negatives, I would do that in my calculator just to make sure. Negative 18 minus negative 6 is negative 12. So this ends up being positive 1 over 12. So we have 10 minus negative 4 over negative 2 minus 0. That ends up being 14 over negative 2, which then reduces down to negative 7. X1. See, again, just a simple mistake. You just kind of lose your focus quickly. Negative 4 minus negative 4 is 0 over 7, so that is 0. Nine minus 8 over negative 2 minus negative 2. 9 minus 8 is 1. Negative 2 minus negative 2 is 0. So 0 is in the denominator. That's undefined. All right, moving on. The next one, now we're talking about the slope-intercept form, so we're getting the slope from slope-intercept form. Now remember, slope-intercept form, if you remember from Algebra 1, it's y is equal to mx plus b, m is the slope, b is my y-intercept. Now remember, the slope is not the number that comes first, it's the number that's with your x. I'll go over that in a second here. But for this one, this slope is just 3. So the slope, we call it m a lot, is 3. This is what I was talking about on this, that I was just saying at the beginning. A lot of people say the slope is 2, the y-intercept is 3. And again, that's not it because the slope is the one with the x. It's not the number that comes first. Some of you guys are going to be able to tell, oh, that means the slope is negative 3. That's fine if you just want to put that. But to be sure, we need to put it in slope-intercept form, so I'm just going to switch these places. Now remember, switching those places, you can't say that that's 3x minus 2. That's not the same. The negative or the minus sign has to stay with the 3x. The 2 is positive, so it has to stay positive. So y is equal to negative 3x plus 2. So my slope is negative 3. Y is equal to 4. Well, if you remember what I told you earlier, that means this is a horizontal line, so the slope is 0. The other thing that I always tell people is this is actually in slope-intercept form. Y is equal to 0x plus 4. They just don't put the 0x because 0x is just 0. It doesn't exist. It's nothing. And this is what I was talking about. In my opinion, this is the hardest because we have to get the y all by itself. So subtract 2x. Again, they're best friends. We leave those together. Subtract the whole thing, 2x. Divide everything by negative 3. Y is equal to 2 over 3x. 6 divided by negative 3 is negative 2. Now, this is slope-intercept form, but that's not your answer yet. The answer is what is the slope? The slope is 2/3. So good. Again, go ahead and do these on your own. Hit pause, do them on your own, then hit play so you can check your answers. Now, one thing with this one, the slope is negative 3 over 4. If I were you guys, I always just put the negative up with the numerator. So I'll even turn this to a plus and put my negative up top. Technically, you can also put it with the denominator, 3 over negative 4. Any of those three, all three of those are equal to each other. Just make sure it's not the same as negative 3 over negative 4. That's not it. Negative over negative means the whole thing is positive. That's not this one. So again, I just put it up in the numerator. I think that makes life a lot easier. Put this in slope-intercept form. 2y is equal to negative 5x plus 12. Divide everything by 2. Y is equal to negative 5 over 2x plus 6. So my slope is negative 5 over 2. Again, this one, if you just want to put your slope as negative 2 right away, that's fine. But also, if you actually want to make sure it's in slope-intercept form, that's not a bad idea. Slope is negative 2. And this one, remember, it's a horizontal line. The slope is 0. If it was a vertical line, it would be x is equal to some number. And that would be undefined. We need the slope for that one. So the last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about parallels and how parallel lines are related and how perpendicular lines are related, having to do with slope, what we've been doing. So slopes of parallel lines are the same. So this says find the slope of line parallel to the given line. So this is the given slope. I want the parallel slope. Now you don't actually have to put this on your paper for a test or a quiz. I just want to make sure you realize I'm not listing the slope for number one. This is the slope of the parallel line. So for this slope, for this line, the slope is -2. So for the parallel line, it's the exact same. Parallels have the exact same slope. For this one, we have 3 over 2x plus 8. So the slope of this line is 3 over 2. So a parallel slope is the same, 3 over 2. Now that's the reason, again, you don't actually have to put parallel slope like that. The reason I'm doing it is so you know I'm not just listing the slope of this line, the original line. I'm giving you the slope of the new line that is parallel. So this one, the slope is 0, so my slope is the same of my parallel line. Now this one, the slope is just 1, so again, the slope is the same. Now one thing, I don't know if I mentioned this, but remember, don't put the x with your slope. So if you say your slope is 1x, that's not going to be right. Make sure your slope is just the number. So doing these on your own, again, it's very similar to what we just got done doing. 3y is equal to 4x plus 8. Divide everything by 3. We end up getting a fraction for our y-intercept. That's okay. I mean, if we were going to graph this, it would be a pain. But we're not graphing it. So that is our slope. So the slope of a parallel line is the exact same. Over here at 8, 3y is equal to -5x plus 8. Divide everything by 3. I get y is equal to -5 over 3x plus 8 over 3. Now again, the slope of this line is -5 over 3, so the slope of a parallel line is the exact same, -5 over 3. Now going on to perpendicular. Slopes of perpendicular lines are opposite, reciprocal. So opposite reciprocal. The opposite is talking about positive or negative. So if you have a negative, you're going to change it to a positive, vice versa. Reciprocal is talking about your fraction. You're going to switch the numerator and the denominator. So for instance, the slope of my original line is 3 over 2. Positive 3 over 2. So the opposite reciprocal, the opposite is negative. So the first one's positive, ours is negative. The reciprocal is 2 over 3. That's it. That's the slope of my perpendicular line. And again, you don't actually have to call it perpendicular slope. You could have just done it this way. That's fine. This one, it's not a fraction, so you put it over 1. So -4 over 1. The opposite reciprocal is positive 1 over 4. So my slope of my perpendicular line, 1 over 4. Opposite reciprocal of this one, -2 over 7. That means it's positive 7 over 2. This one doesn't have anything. Well, remember, it's just a 1x. If you want to make it a fraction, so you can do reciprocal, it's 1 over 1. So positive 1 over 1, the opposite reciprocal is negative. If you switch the numerator and denominator, it's still 1 over 1. That's just -1. So again, go ahead and do these on your own. Y is equal to 4x plus 2, so that's 4 over 1. So the opposite reciprocal, we have positive 4 over 1, is -1 over 4. Now, once we do these, I don't think these are too bad, but again, I have a lot of people that mix this up. I don't know if they get confused or if they mix it up with parallel, but I have a lot of people that make some little mistakes with this. And sometimes they don't even do the opposite reciprocal. Sometimes they do the same slope, which is parallel, not perpendicular. So y is equal to 3x minus 8. So it's positive 3 over 1. Opposite reciprocal is -1 over 3. So my perpendicular slope negative 1 over 3. So if you have any questions on that, make sure you let me know. Make sure you know your slopes. That's definitely going to help you guys for later.